I do want to ask again, how did you get these butterflies to cooperate with your little independent film?
Yeah, about that. We sort of went into this not entirely sure how we were going to do it, which was probably a bad idea in hindsight. But what we ended up doing was, first of all, with the exception of 3 shots, every single butterfly in the movie is a real butterfly. We ended up shooting everything without the butterflies. And then we had Oregon's foremost butterfly expert get all of the butterflies we needed, which was no small feat given the number of different species there are in the film. We shot all those on a green screen, painstakingly matching the angles, and then put them together with the film. We ended up actually the film has 340 visual effects shots, which is 20 more than Star Wars had.
Wow.
And we were supposed to have, we had budgeted for about 30. So it was a good time in post.
So I'm only half joking about the butterflies. I mean, it's amazing. You have so much nature and such great locations, and it's just a testament to the beauty of that area and the wildlife in that area. Tell us more about the shooting on location and everything that entailed.
Sure. Starting when I first read the book, I just fell in love with it. I grew up in Oregon, and the Gifford Pinchot National Forest is where I spent my weekends camping and fishing and hiking. And it just took me back to this amazing place, and I really wanted to share it with the world. And it's such a special place to me because it's a place you can go and spend time and think and heal. And because I come from more of a documentary background, I really wanted to do something I hadn't seen very many of these wilderness films do, which was hopefully transport the audience to the real locations and make them feel like they were on that journey with him, which was one of those things that sounded really easy when I was in my living room. And then once we got out there and realized, lava tunnels are hard to get into, and we're on the side of mountains and snowstorms and all these crazy things. But we were able to do it by having a small crew. People showed a lot of flexibility, and a lot of it really came down to David Cross, who, as you hopefully got from the film, really went for it. That's him hanging off the side of that cliff that you may not be able to tell when he's in the water, but it's like 34 degrees. He spent all day in that freezing cold lava tunnel in his underwear. I mean, he really just, he went for it. And that, I think, is kind of, for me, the core of why the film hopefully feels authentic.
Well, it does, and we see a lot of David, and he really got in nature, in the wild. So, tell us more about the casting and working with such great cast and such a with David and Debra in particular. But you've also got some great comedians involved. Tell us more about that process, because I'm assuming a little indie film shooting. You're telling them you're going to go get them half naked out in the Pacific Northwest. It's not an easy sell.
I just want to say I had to keep telling David he couldn't get naked for certain scenes. So for what that's worth, that's true. Yeah, I love working with comedic actors, not necessarily because I want them to like bring the comedy, but because, especially for something like this, it's really important for me to have the audience feel the character's humanity. And I think David is just wonderful for that, because he's vulnerable. He's willing to go to that place and really hopefully shows us that human side of things. And there's some like more like comedy stuff in the film. I just really like those quiet human moments where I felt like I was watching a real person and not necessarily somebody who's, like acting in the film. And I find that comedians, because they spend so much time performing and so much time just connecting one-on-one with live audiences, really have a special gift that not every actor has.
You have a film here that's got a different bunch of tones, kind of. You've got horror, you've got adventure, you've got comedy, you've got a drama, a bit of fantastic or science fiction-y kind of. I mean, it's about Bigfoot even. So how do you balance all these tones? It's not just the actors, it's you as a director and thinking this through.
Yeah, that was a challenge. We actually were in development. I optioned the book 10 years ago, and it was so we went into production year 8 of me having the book, and that script probably went through 50 or 60 full drafts. And one of the big challenges was the tone, because I think people want to be able to look at something and say, oh, it's a comedy or a drama, or maybe a mix of a couple of tones. And Bob's book wasn't that. And that was what I loved about it. And I really thought it was important to preserve that. So at a certain point, I kind of stopped consciously thinking about tone and just trying to, I guess, let the film tell us what the tone is. I mean, if you meet Bob, his personality and his outlook on life is very similar to the film. And you didn't see all the end credits, but the film's it's based on this book, but it's also based on 7 of his other books. So we got to play with that timeline a lot. And his books range from the very academic to the very funny to the very just heartbreaking.
And how involved was Bob in this process? Did you consult with him a lot, or was it just from you reading the books?
Yeah, we talked regularly throughout the process. He read multiple drafts of the script. It was an ideal collaboration. He was very concerned. He's a well-known nature writer. This is the first film that's been made from one of his books. He has other friends who've written huge books that have been made into huge movies, and they've all been very unhappy with them. So he had that in mind. But he really trusted me with this and was just incredibly supportive. And when he gave notes, they were always about making it better and pointing out things that I wouldn't have known to make it more authentic.
That's great. We've got a couple of questions from the audience, actually, but before I go to those, I wanted to ask Tom, I first met you through documentary film. You'd made a lot of well-known documentary films, and this is your first fiction feature, I guess. How do you make this transition? But to me, it also, by the way, it has a documentary element to it, so it seems to fit with your style pretty well. But tell us more about that transition as a director.
Sure. And I had done fiction films before I got into documentaries, but for the most part, those were short films. I kind of developed this project and put the project together along with the other producers, keeping my documentary skills in mind and trying to kind of create something that played into those, knowing that we would, show up on location and things would probably change, a lot of weather issues, a lot of locations issues, and just sort of had to use that documentary part of my brain to look at what we had and figure out how to get what we needed in the moment. Most of my documentaries tend to deal with people in very dangerous circumstances, people pushed to their limit, very similar to this film. My previous documentary is called Burn. It's about a year in the life of the busiest fire department in the US, which is in Detroit. So we were in and out of burning buildings for 14 months with those guys. I did a documentary out in the Aleutians in Alaska with 2 World War II veterans in a battlefield that's never been cleaned up. So there were unexploded bombs and crashed planes and things. And this sort of, I think, is a sort of natural through line. But I probably should have let the crew kind of have a better understanding of that. Because I think for me, coming from the doc world, it was really easy to just be fluid and flexible. But then you come up against the realities of making a fiction film. I didn't realize when I wrote the film, when you would need a campfire, you're not allowed to do those. So that takes 3 guys and a propane thing that you have to bury in the ground. You have to make a fake fire, and then it makes all this horrible sound, so you don't have sound. So I think it was a big learning curve for me in terms of the parts of this that couldn't kind of get away with just me and a cameraman and David like out in the woods running around.
Well, you seem to figure it out. I want to come back to some of the choices in the film and everything, but one of the questions from the audience is for Paolo, kind of digging into REI Co-op Studios, and were you out looking for a particular story to tell, or did this script come to you and it just happened to fit with your ethos? Tell us a little bit more about REI Co-op Studios getting involved in this kind of project.
Sure. It was a happy coincidence. We were honestly starting to look for feature-length projects. We've been producing a lot of short indie docs, about 12 to 15 a year for the last 4 or 5 years. So we got deep into that space, wanted to find a narrative, wanted to go feature-length, and this came to us by way of Jory, a producer, like I said. But it also met the rubric that we were developing. So the rubric for us as a brand was creating stories that weren't intimidating. You know, there's enough and a lot of really beautiful, like, you know, people conquering mountains, you know, like life-threatening adventure kind of action films that are out there, and those are great, but sometimes again are intimidating for folks who are trying to consider spending more time outside or don't even see themselves outside through those kinds of characters. So we just found David Cross's character that's based on Bob Pyle's, just a quirky, fun way into you know, a story that we think a lot of people could relate to. So that fit our rubric, and certainly in talking with Tom and the producer team, we just all saw eye to eye about what this film could be and how broadly appealing it could be, and we were ready to get on board with that.
One thing I really love is that it just really shows the healing power of nature, which seems to be a fit for both the character naturally and for REI. Did that come up in conversations as well?
It certainly did, and we tell a lot of stories across, you know, podcasts and audio and print journalism in that space. I think you see that sometimes in film stories, but not always. And it was so clear, and the relationship between Bob Pyle's character and his wife Tia is so strong. And we think that a lot more people need to understand that the outdoors is a place where you can find healing and relief and you know, escape notifications of the day, if you will. And certainly in a COVID context, I actually think it's even more relevant where there's different kinds of stresses. And over time, as the outdoors becomes more accessible, it's not accessible in all places due to restrictions. We think that's going to be an important kind of release or place that people can go to escape stress or other kind of events in their life.
I think we're all feeling that now for sure. I want to ask a question for both of you, and I'll start with Tom, but then have Paolo follow up. Everyone always wants to know, when a brand is working with a filmmaker, how do you deal with issues of creative control, editing, trust, all of those things? Tom, as a filmmaker, what was it like from your perspective? And then Paolo from the brand side.
I mean, this is a short answer. The guys were great, and I think everybody just was trying to make the best film that they could. So there weren't, because Paolo mentioned this earlier, because we weren't dealing with product placement or things like that, the focus was really on the film, and I think bringing people an experience that hopefully speaks to REI Co-op's core values, which are the same as the core values that we have and are trying to express with the film.
I'll just add, and I guess make it a PSA for my brand partners. If you think about films and entertainment like a brand, which is to say in a commercial sense, I don't think you're going to approach a film or entertainment partnership the right way. I think if you approach it like a producer, which producers are companies too, you know, and they've got reputations and ideals, then you actually are orienting yourself toward the success of the film. You know, the success of it from a business standpoint, the success of it from a creative standpoint, and I think it's easier to collaborate. So I would just encourage my brand partners in this space who are acting as producers or executive producers, what have you, just think about the success of the film, treat it like a product in its own right, just the way that your creative partners are and your other business partners are, and you have to be willing to approach a project that way and kind of align it with what your brand agenda is, but don't let your brand agenda drive it, because that's not the purpose of film and entertaining audiences.
And Paolo, many brands, as we know from brand storytelling, are experimenting with film and long form film, but it tends to be documentary. And with a narrative film, you're dealing with a script, with casting. Everyone knows David Cross and Debra Messing, but you still don't know how's that mix going to come together. How do you sell this internally to your colleagues and get them to agree that you're going to take a chance on a script?
Yeah, I think we all get to benefit from seeing each other's work. We're not the first brand to go into this space around feature narrative. We're not the first brand to do docs, and so I think part of it is pointing to other good examples that have been successful, and I think part of it also is frankly starting small. Like I said, we've got 40, 50 short docs behind us. We've built a lot of internal trust and expectation. We've figured out what we want to do through those processes, through frankly smaller projects and shorter timelines. And it created permission internally, and I think created confidence for us to know that we could engage on a longer timeline on the bigger project at a higher profile. And so it's just been a progression for us, is the best way to put it.
Great. So one of the other questions from the audience is about the distribution plans, but also before we go into what you're going to do, what was going to be the distribution plan and how did that get impacted by COVID is the specific question from the audience.
Oh, that. Yeah, so we were going to start playing film festivals March 23rd, and we were going to release the film in 60 cities starting in mid-July in conjunction with REI and the National Wildlife Federation. If you're not familiar with them, they're America's largest environmental nonprofit, and a portion of all the film's profits are going to them to help fund programs related to the themes in the film. COVID happened. All the film festivals went away. All the movie theaters really went away. And we oddly found ourselves thematically and structurally really well situated to deal with that. The themes of the film, spending time in the outdoors, the themes of personal transformation, the healing journey, reevaluating your values and learning to put those into practice, I think suddenly became part of a national conversation and had a whole new resonance for people. And then because we had structured the film based on a special event roadshow model, we had cast the film with actors and put music in the film from groups that had a large following. We were partnered with REI, who of course has a huge following, National Wildlife Federation, large following, a number of smaller nonprofits. Originally, they were going to all bring people to those live events and roadshow screenings. And now we're essentially doing the same thing online and at drive-ins starting September 17th, where we'll be having a virtual cinema release where people can rent the movie online. They can attend a series of really fun live events, from jam sessions with the musicians in the film to panels dealing with themes related to the film. And then the film will be released at drive-ins and pop-up cinemas in select areas. So it's been actually, as stressful as the world has been, it's been a really interesting time for us to sort of take that model and find that it can fit really well for what the new distribution landscape is. I mean, we're in the process now, my little pitch about, we're bringing in other partners. So if there's, other groups on here that have questions or want to hear more about what we're up to and want to get involved, let us know. We've got a pretty great roadshow put together.
That's great. So September 17th, it'll launch online and drive-ins and pop-up kind of simultaneously. It's a hybrid release at the same time, so to speak, right? And REI will be supporting that in some way with promotions, and you're open to other partners. So Paolo, tell us a little bit more about the kinds of things that a brand like REI is doing to help promote this film, or that other partners might be able to do as well.
Yeah, certainly. So our plans changed and have continued to change, but we're glad to kind of stick the landing here with this roadshow and pop-up drive-in approach. In short, we've got 19 million members. We've got a lot of people to activate that are passionate about the outdoors. So through our own communication channels, a lot of social media, email, we're creating some unique podcast shows. We're creating some unique journalism to cover everything happening there. We are working with our nonprofit partners as well. We've got 400 nonprofits that REI works through with philanthropy. We spread the word out through them. Certainly, in all the markets where we're doing pop-ups, REI is supporting, whether it's because the pop-up is in our lot where our store is, which is really cool, or just another great location. We'll be activating some of our field teams where we can, certainly with considerations of local policies or restrictions to make that the best experience possible. So you'll see a lot of rooftop shouting from us in our digital channels, and then certainly we'll be on the ground where we can be, and that's the game plan right now.
That's great. That's a real testament to the variety of things that REI is doing in the media space. You mentioned podcasts and blog posts, all these different things. So I think it's great that you can activate all of those. Tom, your lead partner is REI. You're also partnered with some nonprofits and stuff. I'm assuming that this is helping you bring kind of an army to the release. How's that working?
Well, so far. On our last film, Burn, the firefighting movie, we released it in 170 cities with reach of about 70,000. And on this film, our current reach is just under 100 million. So we're really excited about that. And I think, especially given the themes of the film and the various, I mean, our nonprofit partners range from environmental groups to outdoor groups to groups that deal specifically with like ovarian cancer. So it's really exciting to me to be able to have all of these groups promote the film based on what each of their audiences is going to be most focused on.
That's great. So one thing we've neglected to do is tell people how to find out information about all these screenings. What's your web address, and how do people find out how to get in touch with you if they want to get involved as a partner, or if they just want to watch the film and tell others how to log in and watch it, or go to a drive-in? How do we do this?
I like that you said web address. It makes me want to reply like HTTP : it's darkdividefilm.com. And actually a new website's coming up in a few days. But through that, you can contact us. That email goes to myself and the other producers. You can join our mailing list there to find out about future screenings. If you're interested in getting involved in some capacity or just hearing more about the film and some of the causes we're associated with, shoot us an email. I'm on lockdown. I got nowhere to be. I'd love to talk to you.
That's great. Tell us more about Bigfoot. That's a big piece of this film. Maybe about some of the film instead of just the activation, real quick.
Yeah, that was something we went back and forth on a lot, right? We were worried if we sort of pitched this or positioned it as a Bigfoot film, everybody would think of like Harry and the Hendersons or something. So Bigfoot's obviously an important part of the story, but the reality of it, and Bob's very special place in the Bigfoot community, and he's kind of a rock star there these days, is here's one of America's greatest naturalists. He's a PhD from Yale, a very well-known writer, had these Bigfoot encounters, and he approached them in a very different way. He looked at it very scientifically and analytically, and I love that. And I think in his conversations with the different tribes during his trek, he came to the conclusion that it doesn't really matter what Bigfoot actually is, but what Bigfoot, he believes, represents is our very important tie to nature and a reminder of a time when we were, how does he say this? When we were a part of nature rather than apart from nature. And I really liked that. And I thought that was such a neat way to tackle the subject matter. And, if you talk to him now, he'll say, hey, I have a theory that there's a large hominid, is that the right word, that lives in the Pacific Northwest, and no one has disproven it. So as a scientist, I have to give that theory credence. And we ran into a lot of animals filming this movie, some scary animals, but I have yet to see a Bigfoot. So maybe the next movie.
Well, the owl looked pretty dangerous on its own. So you dealt with some wild animals. We have to wrap up pretty quickly here, but some last words. Paolo, for brands out there that are thinking about moving into content, any last thoughts on the best ways to do this from the brand perspective? Yeah.
First, my counsel would be do it. I think this is the most compelling way to engage an audience. This isn't like the ad flying by in a news feed and you hope to stop. This is an engaged audience that are spending time thinking about what you care about and what your brand's value systems are. I would just encourage everyone to do the internal work that's required to make sure that you don't have internal partners that are creating some awkwardness for your creative partners. You're like, Tom is an awesome visionary creative. I want to respect his work. And I think brands need to be careful not to create their own bureaucracy that gets in the way of great creative work that ultimately impacts an audience. And so if you're customer minded, if you're audience minded, then I think your job at a brand is to do the diligence to make sure that there's as little friction as possible for that creative project to be successful. So that way your audience has a good experience.
That's great. And REI continues to do other media, and you do short form stuff as well and podcasts. Is it just rei.com if people want to find everything else you're doing, or is there a specific place for co-op studios?
Yeah, easiest place to find most of our content, all the above, would be rei.com/journal. And that's where you can find all of our multimedia as well as article and journalism content.
Great. And Tom, any last words for the audience about this film, what you're doing with the tour, and anything we didn't cover?
Just to echo what Paolo said, it's, I think, I've been lucky in that most of the films I've made have been put together similarly to this, or we partnered with brands, and not just for the production of the film, but in the release of the film. And I mean, I can say firsthand, based on other projects and how this is coming together, to be able to bring an experience like this to people, it takes the audience and a potential customer to a whole other level, and has a degree of impact that you just can't achieve through traditional marketing means. Yeah,
well, we were very lucky to be able to premiere it here with Brand Storytelling and Elevate. It's been just a pleasure to be able to watch the film. It's also very hard to watch the film while locked in my home on quarantine. So I'm very much wanting to get out there and experience nature as a result of this film. Everyone, thanks for participating from Elevate. Thanks to the folks at Brand Storytelling. Thanks to the audience. And thanks to Paolo from REI and Tom Putnam. Tom, congrats. There's no cheering, but you did a great job. So thanks so much.
Thanks for the opportunity and for being our first screening. This is a good, easy way to...
Tell your friends, tune in September 17th, and they'll be able to see the film. Thanks again, guys.
Thank you so much.